Jasmine Washington sits frozen in her first-class seat, blood trickling down her arm where Kimberly Parker's nails dug in. The flight attendant screams about stealing the seat while passengers record everything. On a video call, Terrence Washington watches his daughter's live stream, face hardening as he interrupts his executive meeting. Freeze all SkyWest Airlines accounts, $1.3 billion halted instantly. Before we dive deeper into this shocking story, where are you watching from today? Drop your location in the comments below. If this kind of injustice makes your blood boil, hit that like button right now and subscribe to stay updated on stories that expose the harsh realities many face daily. Now, let's rewind to see how this explosive situation began. The morning sun filtered through the blinds of Jasmine Washington's Baltimore apartment as she triple-checked her presentation materials. At 28, she had already accomplished what many medical professionals could only dream of achieving in a lifetime. As one of the youngest neurosurgeons completing a prestigious fellowship at Johns Hopkins, Jasmine had defied every stereotype and barrier placed before her. "Dad always says preparation prevents poor performance," she murmured to herself, carefully placing her laptop in her carry-on bag. Her fingers traced over the small photo tucked into the side pocket. A faded picture of her mother who had passed away when Jasmine was just 12. "Wish you could see me now, Mom." Jasmine's journey to medical excellence hadn't been smooth. Growing up as the daughter of Terrence Washington meant having opportunities many didn't, but it also meant facing constant scrutiny and assumptions. How many times had she heard whispers that she only got into Harvard Medical School because of her father's money or to fill a diversity quota? The truth: that she had graduated top of her class and scored in the 99th percentile on MCATs, somehow always got overlooked. Terrence Washington's own story was the American dream with all its complications. Born in a cramped apartment in Harlem, he had climbed from poverty through sheer determination and brilliant innovation. His tech company, Washington Enterprises, began in a garage with 2 second-hand computers and had grown into a global empire worth billions. The financial world respected him, but never fully accepted him, something he made sure his daughter understood from an early age. "Remember, Jazzy," he told her when she came home crying after being excluded from a classmate's birthday party, "they'll always see your skin before they see your soul. Hold your head higher than they can reach, and your mind sharper than they can comprehend." That lesson had shaped her life. Through medical school, residency, and now her fellowship, Jasmine had maintained the perfect balance of confidence without arrogance, excellence without boasting. Her research on neural regeneration in trauma patients was groundbreaking, which was why today's flight to San Francisco was so crucial. The International Conference on Neurological Advancement had selected her presentation from thousands of submissions, recognition that transcended her famous last name. As she locked her apartment door, her phone buzzed with a calendar reminder: video call with Dad, 7 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. Their weekly calls were sacred, no matter how busy either of them became. Terrence might run a corporate empire, but he had never missed a chance to check in with his only child. What Jasmine didn't know as she hailed a rideshare to the airport was just how interconnected her father's business and her upcoming flight actually were. SkyWest Airlines had recently signed a massive contract with Washington Enterprises to overhaul their entire digital infrastructure and payment processing systems. Nearly $1.3 billion in transactions flowed through Washington's platforms every month, a dependence that SkyWest executives were quite comfortable with, never imagining it could become leverage in a personal battle. At Baltimore Washington International Airport, Jasmine moved efficiently through security, her TSA pre-check status expediting the process. Still, she noticed the extra glances from security personnel, the slight double-checking of her ID that her white colleagues rarely experienced. Small indignities she had learned to file away rather than let them consume her energy. Boarding would begin in 40 minutes. Jasmine found a quiet corner of the first-class lounge to review her presentation one final time. Tomorrow, she would stand before hundreds of the world's top neurologists and present findings that could change how trauma patients were treated. The possibility of helping thousands of patients recover function that would otherwise be lost forever made any personal discomfort worth enduring. Dr. Washington. A lounge attendant approached with a bottle of water. Is everything to your satisfaction today? Yes, thank you, Jasmine smiled, the professional mask slipping into place with practiced ease. What she couldn't know was how quickly that mask would be tested, how violently her dignity would be assaulted, and how her father's economic power was about to become both shield and sword in a battle neither of them had sought. First-class passengers for SkyWest Airlines Flight 1382 to San Francisco, we are now boarding through Gate A7. Jasmine gathered her belongings, sliding her laptop into her designer carry-on, a birthday gift from her father that she'd initially resisted as too extravagant. Now she appreciated its durability and professional appearance as she navigated the terminal toward her gate. She presented her boarding pass to the gate agent, a middle-aged woman with a practiced smile who barely glanced at her before waving her through. The jetway stretched before her, and Jasmine felt the familiar mixture of anticipation and slight anxiety she always experienced before flights. Not fear of flying, fear of existing in enclosed spaces where she couldn't escape uncomfortable situations. "Welcome aboard," greeted the flight attendant at the aircraft door, a man whose name tag read Michael. His smile reached his eyes as he checked her boarding pass. "First class is to your right, Dr. Washington. Enjoy your flight." Jasmine nodded her thanks and turned right, finding her window seat in the second row. She stowed her carry-on in the overhead compartment and settled in, immediately removing her presentation notes to review one last time before takeoff. The soft leather seat enveloped her comfortably as other first-class passengers began to board. A white businessman in his 50s took the aisle seat next to her with a brief nod before immersing himself in his phone. Across the aisle, an older white couple settled in, the flight attendants immediately offering them pre-departure beverages without checking their boarding passes. It was when the main cabin began boarding that Jasmine first noticed Kimberly Parker. The flight attendant moved through first class with practiced efficiency, helping passengers stow bags and taking drink orders, from everyone except Jasmine. "Excuse me," Jasmine said politely as Kimberly passed by for the third time. "Could I get some water, please?" Kimberly paused, her expression shifting almost imperceptibly. "I'll need to see your boarding pass." Jasmine blinked, momentarily confused since she'd already been settled for 15 minutes and had passed through 2 boarding pass checks. Nevertheless, she retrieved the digital pass on her phone and displayed it. Kimberly's eyes narrowed as she studied it longer than necessary. "This seat is first class. Are you sure you're in the right seat?" The businessman beside Jasmine glanced up briefly, then returned to his phone, choosing not to intervene. "Yes, I'm certain," Jasmine replied evenly, her voice betraying none of the familiar tension building in her shoulders. "2A, as shown on my boarding pass." Kimberly responded, her tone dripping with skepticism. "These seats are quite expensive." The implication hung in the air between them. Jasmine had heard variations of this sentiment throughout her life. The unspoken assumption that wealth and black identity were somehow incompatible. "I'm aware of the ticket price," Jasmine said, maintaining her composure. "Could I please have some water?" Kimberly walked away without responding, moving to the galley where she engaged in hushed conversation with another flight attendant, casting glances in Jasmine's direction. Jasmine took a deep breath and returned to her notes, though her concentration was now broken. She was acutely aware of being watched, evaluated, deemed suspicious. Years of experience had taught her that responding with anger would only reinforce stereotypes, while silence might be interpreted as acceptance of mistreatment. The balance was exhausting to maintain. Other first-class passengers continued boarding, none questioned about their seating assignments. Kimberly returned minutes later, this time with a passenger manifest in hand. "Your name?" she demanded, standing over Jasmine. "Dr. Jasmine Washington," she replied, straightening her posture slightly. Sometimes the professional title helped, though not always. Kimberly ran her finger down the list, frowning. "Washington. Washington. I don't see, oh." Her expression shifted as she apparently found the name. But instead of apologizing, she simply walked away again. The plane filled completely, and still no water had been offered to Jasmine. As the main cabin door closed, she decided to use the lavatory before takeoff. When she returned to her seat, she found Kimberly standing there. "I need to check your boarding pass again," Kimberly stated loudly enough for nearby passengers to hear. "Is there a problem?" Jasmine asked quietly. "We've had issues with seat stealing," Kimberly announced, drawing attention from surrounding passengers. "People sneaking into first class who don't belong." The businessman beside Jasmine now looked uncomfortable but remained silent. Across the aisle, the older couple watched with undisguised interest. "I've shown my boarding pass twice," Jasmine responded, keeping her voice calm despite the public humiliation. "I'm in my assigned seat." "Well, I need to see ID this time," Kimberly insisted. "To make sure you're actually Jasmine Washington." Jasmine reached for her purse, acutely aware of the eyes on her. As she searched for her driver's license, Kimberly made another comment that sent a jolt through her. "If there's a Washington on this flight's first class, I'd know about it. The Washingtons I know don't look like you." The racial undertone was unmistakable. Jasmine's hand froze momentarily as she processed the comment, then continued retrieving her ID. She handed it to Kimberly without comment, determined not to escalate the situation. Kimberly examined the license, her expression darkening. "This could be anyone," she muttered, though the photo clearly matched Jasmine. "That's my government-issued identification," Jasmine stated firmly. "Now, I've complied with multiple checks. May I please have some water?" Instead of responding, Kimberly turned to her colleague Michael, who had been watching the interaction with growing concern. "Get the manifest from the captain," she instructed him. "There's a situation." While Michael was gone, other first-class passengers received their pre-departure champagne. The contrast was stark and intentional, every white passenger served while Jasmine sat excluded, marked as "other." When the champagne cart reached her row, Jasmine decided to test the boundaries. "I'd like a glass of champagne, please," she requested politely. Kimberly's eyes flashed. "Champagne is for first-class passengers only." "I am a first-class passenger," Jasmine responded, her patience wearing thin. "As my boarding pass and ID have confirmed multiple times." Something in Kimberly snapped. "Listen, I don't know how you got in this seat, but," "Excuse me," interrupted a voice from across the aisle. An older white woman was recording the interaction on her phone. "I'd like to know why this lady isn't being served when everyone else is." "This doesn't concern you," Kimberly snapped. "It concerns everyone when someone is being treated differently," the woman replied. Kimberly's face flushed with anger. "She doesn't belong here." "According to what?" Jasmine finally asked, her voice steady but firm. "My credentials have been verified multiple times. What exactly about me suggests I don't belong in first class?" The question hung in the air, daring Kimberly to articulate the prejudice that was becoming increasingly obvious to everyone watching. Instead of answering, Kimberly reached for Jasmine's arm. "You need to move to your actual seat." "This is my actual seat," Jasmine insisted, trying to pull away. What happened next occurred so quickly that later accounts would differ slightly. Kimberly grabbed Jasmine's arm with shocking force, her manicured nails digging into skin as she attempted to physically remove her from the seat. Jasmine resisted, and in the struggle, Kimberly's nails broke skin, drawing blood that began to trickle down Jasmine's dark skin in vivid crimson streaks. "Get your hands off her," shouted someone from a few rows back. Phones throughout first class rose to record the altercation as Kimberly, now completely unhinged, began hurling accusations. "You people always trying to get things you don't deserve. Always playing the victim. I know your type." Jasmine remained seated, one hand pressed to her bleeding arm, her expression a mixture of shock and resigned familiarity. This wasn't the first time she'd faced racism, just perhaps the most violent and public instance. What Kimberly couldn't know, what would change everything in the next few minutes, was that Jasmine's weekly video call with her father had been scheduled early due to his meetings in Tokyo. Terrence Washington was watching his daughter's live stream from his executive suite across the Pacific, witnessing every second of the assault in real time. And the titan of industry, who had built an empire by turning pain into power, was about to demonstrate what happened when someone harmed the one person he valued above all else. "She's bleeding." The flight attendant made her bleed. A passenger's voice rose above the commotion as cell phone cameras captured every moment of the confrontation. Jasmine Washington sat perfectly still, a study in dignity under duress, while blood seeped between the fingers pressed against her arm. Across the Pacific Ocean, in a Tokyo skyscraper overlooking the Imperial Palace, Terrence Washington's video call with his daughter had transformed into a front-row seat to her public humiliation. The billionaire's expression remained stoic as he watched, only the whitening knuckles of his clenched fist betraying his fury. "Gentlemen," he addressed the executives gathered around the conference table, his voice deceptively calm. "We'll need to reconvene later." "But, Mr. Washington, the Nakamura merger can't wait," began his CFO. "It just did," Terrence replied, his eyes never leaving the screen where his daughter's live stream continued. The dozen executives exchanged glances, recognizing the steel in their boss's tone, and quietly filed out. Back on the plane, Kimberly Parker had shifted from physical assault to verbal barrage. "You think you're special? You think your fancy clothes and attitude give you the right to be up here? Go back to your seat and coach where you belong." "I am in my assigned seat," Jasmine repeated, her medical training kicking in as she applied pressure to the scratch on her arm. "You've assaulted me and drawn blood. I suggest you step back before you compound the situation." "Are you threatening me?" Kimberly shrieked, playing to the audience of passengers. "See? This is what they do. Act aggressive and then play victim." Michael, the other flight attendant, finally intervened, trying to pull Kimberly back. "Kim, stop. This is way out of line. Don't touch me." Kimberly snapped at him. "You want to side with her? Fine." The older white woman who had spoken up earlier was now standing in the aisle. "I'm Diane Frost, retired judge from the Ninth Circuit. I'm witnessing and recording a clear case of assault and what appears to be racial discrimination by an airline employee. I'd like the captain to come out here immediately." Kimberly's face contorted with rage. "You don't understand. These people are always trying to sneak into first class. She probably found that boarding pass or bought it from someone." Jasmine remained silent, letting the absurdity of the accusation speak for themselves. Her phone, still propped on the tray table, continued streaming the entire incident to her father. In Tokyo, Terrence Washington opened another line on his secure phone. "Brandon," he said when his lawyer answered. "You're seeing this?" "I'm watching it live, sir," replied Brandon Mitchell, the Washington family's trusted legal counsel for over 15 years. "Already documenting everything and contacting our team at SkyWest's headquarters." "Not enough," Terrence stated flatly. "Get me Harvey in finance. Now." As the confrontation on the plane escalated, social media platforms were exploding with activity. The hashtag Justice for Jasmine began trending within minutes, helped along by several passengers live streaming from different angles. Each new comment from Kimberly dug the airline into a deeper hole, especially when she uttered the phrase that would soon appear in headlines worldwide: "First class is for first-class people, not your kind." The cabin fell silent for a beat before erupting in gasps and murmurs. Even those who had been pretending not to notice could no longer ignore the explicit racism. Jasmine finally broke her silence. "For the record," she said calmly, looking directly into a nearby passenger's camera, "I am Dr. Jasmine Washington, neurosurgeon at Johns Hopkins Medical Center, presenting at the International Conference on Neurological Advancement tomorrow. I purchased this first-class ticket legally, presented my boarding pass multiple times, showed my identification, and have now been physically assaulted by this flight attendant who seems unable to believe that someone who looks like me belongs in this seat. Her composed response, contrasting starkly with Kimberly's unraveling behavior, instantly transformed the narrative online. Comments flooded in, Dr. Washington showing incredible restraint while literally bleeding. Fire this flight attendant now, SkyWest. This is what we deal with every day. News outlets began picking up the feeds, broadcasting the ongoing situation to millions. Producers scrambled to research Jasmine Washington, quickly discovering her impressive credentials and her connection to one of America's wealthiest men. The captain, finally alerted to the situation, dispatched the first officer to investigate while he communicated with ground control. By then, SkyWest's social media team was in full crisis mode, issuing a bland statement that only fueled public outrage. SkyWest Airlines is aware of an incident on Flight 1382 and is investigating the circumstances. We take all passenger concerns seriously. For Jasmine, the public spectacle triggered memories of countless previous microaggressions: the patient who refused to believe she was the surgeon, not the nurse, the security guard who followed her through the hospital parking garage, the real estate agent who, accidentally, showed her only homes in predominantly black neighborhoods despite her budget. But never before had she experienced such blatant prejudice while being physically restrained from leaving. The airplane, already taxiing toward the runway, had become both battleground and prison. The first officer arrived in the cabin, taking in the scene with evident alarm. "What's happening here?" "This woman assaulted a passenger," Diane Frost stated firmly. "There are at least a dozen witnesses and multiple recordings. The passenger is bleeding and requires medical attention. She was trying to steal a first-class seat." Kimberly insisted, though her voice had lost some conviction as she registered the sea of phones recording her every word. "I'd like to see the passenger manifest," the first officer requested, maintaining professional detachment. While he reviewed the documents, Jasmine's phone chimed with an incoming text. It was from her father. "I see everything. Hold your head high. This ends now." Jasmine barely had time to process the message before the first officer's expression changed dramatically as he reviewed the passenger list. "Ms. Parker," he addressed Kimberly with sudden formality, "please return to the galley immediately." "But now," he cut her off, his tone brooking no argument. As Kimberly retreated, the first officer turned to Jasmine. "Dr. Washington, on behalf of the flight crew and SkyWest Airlines, I sincerely apologize for this inexcusable incident. Are you in need of medical attention for your injury?" "I can manage for now," Jasmine replied, though the scratches on her arm continued to seep blood. "But I would appreciate documentation of the injury and incident." "Of course," he nodded, visibly concerned. "I need to speak with the captain. We may need to return to the gate." What the first officer didn't share, what he had just learned through an urgent message from ground control, was that SkyWest Airlines had suddenly found itself in financial freefall. Transaction systems across the company had frozen simultaneously, affecting everything from fuel purchases to payroll processing. $1.3 billion in daily cash flow had stopped without warning. The timing was not coincidental. In Tokyo, Terrence Washington replaced the phone in its cradle and turned back to his computer screen where his daughter's live stream continued. His expression revealed nothing, but those who knew him well would have recognized the slight nod of his head, the same gesture he made when closing a particularly satisfying business deal. The economic giant had moved his first piece on the board, and SkyWest Airlines was about to learn why even Wall Street's most cutthroat players treaded carefully around Terrence Washington. In the sleek downtown offices of SkyWest Airlines' financial headquarters, alarms began blaring, not physical sirens, but the digital alerts that signaled financial catastrophe. Transactions across all platforms had suddenly halted, payment processing systems returned error messages, and the automated fuel purchasing program that kept the airline's fleet running worldwide displayed a simple message: access revoked. Gloria Patterson, SkyWest's chief financial officer, stared at her screen in disbelief as her phone lit up with calls from increasingly panicked department heads. "What do you mean, frozen?" she demanded of her head of digital infrastructure. "Systems don't just freeze themselves. It's not our systems," he explained, his voice tight with stress. "It's the Washington Enterprise's processing architecture. They've cut us off." "Washington? As in Terrence Washington?" Gloria's blood ran cold. Why would he? Her assistant burst into the office without knocking, phone in hand. "Ma'am, you need to see this. It's going viral." The video playing on the screen showed their own flight attendant, Kimberly Parker, physically assaulting a young black woman in first class. Blood visible on the passenger's arm. Racial comments clearly audible. "Oh my God," Gloria whispered, recognition dawning. "Is that Dr. Jasmine Washington?" her assistant confirmed grimly. "Terrence Washington's daughter." In that moment, Gloria understood exactly why $1.3 billion in transactions had suddenly frozen. The connection between Washington Enterprises and SkyWest went far deeper than most people realized. 6 months earlier, SkyWest had contracted Washington's company to overhaul their entire digital infrastructure, payment processing, and customer management systems. The integration was so complete that every dollar flowing through the airline now passed through servers controlled by Washington Enterprises. "Get Arthur on the phone," Gloria ordered, referring to SkyWest's CEO. "And for God's sake, someone contact the captain of that flight." At precisely the same moment, in his Tokyo office, Terrence Washington was making calls of his own. The first was to Brandon Mitchell, who had been the Washington family's legal counsel since before Jasmine graduated high school. "Brandon, I want everything. Full investigation into SkyWest's hiring practices, discrimination complaints, internal communications. I want to know if this Kimberly Parker has a history, and I want to know who protected her if she does." "Already on it," Brandon replied. "But Terrence, the financial freeze, that's going to attract regulatory attention." "Let it," Terrence responded, his voice icy calm. "I'm exercising my company's right to suspend service to a client in violation of our terms of service. Section 14.3 specifically prohibits using our platforms in support of discriminatory practices." Brandon couldn't help but smile at the shrewdness. Terrence had insisted on that clause in every contract since founding the company, long before it had the power to bring corporations to their knees. "Understood. What about Jasmine? Does she know what you've done?" "She'll figure it out soon enough," Terrence replied. "Her presentation is tomorrow. Make sure nothing interferes with that, regardless of what happens with SkyWest." As they spoke, Jasmine remained in her first-class seat, now being attended to by a flight attendant with a first aid kit while the first officer spoke urgently with the captain over the intercom. The plane had stopped taxiing and now sat idle on the tarmac. Passengers throughout the cabin were engrossed in their phones, watching the incident they just witnessed explode across social media and news sites. The story was evolving by the second, with financial reporters now connecting the dots between the viral video and SkyWest's sudden stock plunge. Dr. Washington, the first officer, approached again, his demeanor now almost deferential. "The captain has decided to return to the gate. Law enforcement will meet the aircraft to document the assault, and medical personnel will be available if needed." Jasmine nodded, maintaining her composure. "Thank you. What will happen to Ms. Parker?" The question hung in the air, highlighting Jasmine's remarkable restraint in asking about process rather than punishment. The first officer hesitated before answering. "She's been removed from duty pending investigation, effective immediately." What he didn't add was that the order had come directly from SkyWest's CEO, who was now frantically trying to contain a crisis that threatened the airline's very existence. What are your thoughts on how Terrence Washington used his financial power to respond to the racial discrimination his daughter faced? Comment number 1 if you believe his actions were justified, or number 2 if you think he went too far by freezing $1.3 billion in transactions. Don't forget to hit the like button if you've ever witnessed or experienced discrimination while traveling, and subscribe to our channel for more stories that expose injustice in unexpected places. Now, let's think about this situation from another angle. Should companies be held financially accountable when their employees discriminate against customers? How would this incident have played out if Jasmine didn't have a billionaire father to leverage economic pressure? Let's find out as our story continues. The Boeing 737 slowly taxied back to Gate A7, accompanied by two airport vehicles with flashing lights. Inside the terminal, an unprecedented scene was unfolding. Police officers formed a perimeter near the gate area, while paramedics stood by with a medical kit. More unusual was the cluster of suits, SkyWest executives who had dropped everything and raced to the airport upon learning the identity of the passenger at the center of the viral confrontation. In the cockpit, Captain Robert Hayes received yet another urgent communication from SkyWest headquarters. "They want us to deplane Ms. Parker through the rear exit," he told his first officer. "Apparently there are reporters gathering in the terminal." "And Dr. Washington?" Captain Hayes sighed heavily. "They're sending representatives to personally escort her. Direct orders from the CEO." On the tarmac, Zoe Thompson watched the returning aircraft with a churning stomach. As SkyWest's Chief Diversity Officer, a position created just 18 months earlier following a previous PR disaster, she was supposed to prevent exactly this kind of situation. Yet she hadn't even been informed of the incident until it was trending on Twitter. Now she was expected to perform public damage control for actions that sickened her personally. As an African American woman herself, Zoe had faced similar treatment throughout her corporate career. She had taken the SkyWest position hoping to create meaningful change from within. Instead, she often found herself used as a shield, the black face trotted out to prove the company wasn't racist while actual complaints of discrimination were buried in HR bureaucracy. Today would test her integrity like never before. Inside the aircraft, Jasmine Washington carefully gathered her belongings, wincing slightly as the movement pulled at the scratches on her arm. The first-class passengers around her had transformed from silent observers to vocal supporters, offering contact information as witnesses. Diane Frost, the retired judge, sat across the aisle reviewing the video she had captured. "Dr. Washington," she said quietly, "I've sent this footage to a colleague who specializes in civil rights litigation. What happened to you is textbook discriminatory treatment and assault. I hope you'll pursue this to the fullest extent." "Thank you," Jasmine replied, her voice steady despite the emotional and physical toll of the past hour. "But my primary concern right now is making it to San Francisco for my medical presentation tomorrow." The plane finally reached the gate, and the captain's voice came over the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, we apologize for the return to the gate and the delay to your journey. We ask that you remain seated while we address an internal matter. Regular deplaning will begin shortly." Two police officers boarded first, proceeding directly to the galley where Kimberly Parker had been isolated. Her face was blotchy with tears and rage as they escorted her toward the rear of the aircraft, away from the waiting cameras at the jet bridge. Next came the SkyWest delegation, led by a visibly uncomfortable executive who introduced himself as Victor Larson, Senior Vice President of Customer Experience. "Dr. Washington," he began, his voice pitched low as if hoping other passengers wouldn't hear. "On behalf of SkyWest Airlines, I want to extend our deepest apologies for this inexcusable incident. We would like to have our medical team examine your injury and take your statement in our private lounge." "I'd prefer to give my statement here," Jasmine replied calmly. "With witnesses present." Victor's expression tightened. "Of course. But perhaps medical attention." "I am a physician," Jasmine reminded him. "The scratches are superficial, though they should be photographed for the record." As they spoke, Jasmine's phone buzzed with an incoming call. The screen displayed, "Dad." "Excuse me," she said to Victor. "I need to take this." "Jazzy," Terrence Washington's voice was warm with concern. "Are you all right?" "I'm okay, Dad," she assured him, aware of the listening ears around her. "Just a minor injury. The police are here taking statements." "I'm landing in San Francisco in 4 hours," he informed her. Brandon is already at the airport there. He'll meet your flight and make sure nothing interferes with your presentation tomorrow. Jasmine felt a wave of gratitude mixed with complicated emotion. Her father's protective instincts were both comforting and occasionally overwhelming. As an adult establishing her own professional identity, she sometimes struggled with the shadow of his influence. "Dad, you don't need to." "This isn't negotiable," he interrupted gently. "And Jazzy? Don't sign anything SkyWest puts in front of you. Not a statement, not a settlement offer, nothing. Brandon handles everything from here." The call ended just as Brandon Mitchell's name flashed on the screen with a text message, "Coming up the jet bridge now. Don't speak to airline representatives without me present." Victor Larson was still hovering nearby, his discomfort growing as he glanced at his own phone. The messages he was receiving from headquarters suggested the situation was deteriorating by the minute. SkyWest stock had dropped 8% in under an hour. The hashtag boycott SkyWest was trending nationally. And most alarmingly, every transaction system connected to Washington Enterprises remained frozen, with no communication from Terrence Washington's team despite desperate outreach attempts. The jet bridge door opened again to admit a tall, impeccably dressed black man in his 40s. Brandon Mitchell moved with the confident precision of someone who had navigated corporate battlefields for decades. He spotted Jasmine immediately and approached, ignoring Victor Larson completely. "Dr. Washington," he greeted her formally, maintaining professional distance in this public setting though he had known her since childhood. "I'm here to represent you in this matter." "Thank you for coming so quickly," she replied, matching his tone. Brandon turned to Victor as if just noticing him. "Mr. Larson, I believe. I understand your employee physically assaulted my client and used racially discriminatory language, all of which has been documented by multiple witnesses and recordings." Victor's professional smile faltered. "We're conducting a full investigation, which we'll cooperate with fully once I've reviewed the process," Brandon cut him off smoothly. "For now, Dr. Washington needs to provide a statement to law enforcement about the assault and then continue to her destination. I assume SkyWest will be arranging alternative transportation to ensure she reaches San Francisco in time for her medical conference." The commotion had drawn attention throughout the terminal, where passengers recorded the scene on their phones. Among them was a local news reporter who had been traveling on an unrelated assignment but recognized the viral story unfolding before her. "Dr. Washington," she called out. "Would you care to comment on what happened aboard this flight?" Brandon stepped slightly in front of Jasmine, shielding her from the growing media presence. "My client will provide a statement at an appropriate time. For now, we're focused on documenting this incident properly with law enforcement and ensuring Dr. Washington receives medical attention." Outside the media spotlight, in SkyWest's operations center, the crisis was expanding exponentially. Without Washington Enterprises' payment processing systems, fuel suppliers were demanding alternative payment methods before refueling aircraft. Vendors were placing accounts on hold. The entire digital infrastructure that kept the modern airline functioning was grinding to a halt. Arthur Reynolds, SkyWest CEO, was in the middle of a heated emergency board meeting when his phone lit up with a text from Victor Larson, "Washington's lawyer is here. This is going nuclear." Arthur had built his career on navigating corporate crises, but nothing had prepared him for this perfect storm. The unfiltered racism displayed by his employee combined with the victim being the daughter of a man who literally controlled their financial lifeline was a nightmare beyond imagination. "Get her whatever she wants," he texted back. "And find out what it will take to get our systems back online." Back at the gate, police officers were taking Jasmine's statement while medical personnel photographed and treated the scratches on her arm. The conference organizers in San Francisco had been notified of the situation and assured her that her presentation slot would be adjusted if necessary. What no one could fully appreciate in that moment was how this incident would expand beyond one flight attendant's actions or even one airline's policies. In living rooms and boardrooms across America, uncomfortable conversations about race, privilege, and corporate responsibility were beginning. Social media exploded with similar stories from minority passengers, suggesting Jasmine's experience was far from isolated. And in the background, Terrence Washington's carefully calculated power move was forcing an industry long accused of looking the other way on discrimination to confront its failings under the harsh spotlight of public scrutiny and financial pressure. As Jasmine finally boarded a hastily arranged private jet to San Francisco, SkyWest's attempt at damage control, she couldn't help but wonder how different the outcome might have been without her father's name and influence. How many others faced similar discrimination without the power to force accountability? That question would drive what came next. The lights in SkyWest's executive boardroom burned well past midnight as the crisis management team struggled to contain the fallout. CEO Arthur Reynolds paced the length of the polished table, his typical commanding presence diminished by the catastrophe unfolding on multiple screens around the room. "Tell me again why we can't simply switch payment processors," he demanded of his chief technology officer. "It's not that simple," the exhausted CTO explained for the third time. "Washington Enterprises didn't just process our payments, they rebuilt our entire digital infrastructure. Every reservation, every crew schedule, every maintenance record is flowing through their systems. Extracting ourselves would take months, not hours." Arthur slammed his palm against the table. "Then someone get Terrence Washington on the phone. Offer whatever it takes." Gloria Patterson, the CFO, cleared her throat. "We've made 17 attempts to reach him through official channels. His team responds with the same message each time: Mr. Washington is unavailable until the conclusion of his daughter's medical conference presentation. That's 36 hours from now." Arthur exploded. "We'll be bankrupt by then." The boardroom door opened to admit Zoe Thompson, the chief diversity officer, accompanied by 2 members of the legal team. All 3 carried tablets filled with damning information. "You found something?" Arthur asked, hope flickering briefly. Zoe met his gaze unflinchingly. "Yes, but you're not going to like it." She placed her tablet on the table and projected its contents onto the main screen. "These are all formal complaints filed against Kimberly Parker over the past 3 years. 11 separate incidents involving passengers of color, 8 specifically involving black passengers in first class." A stunned silence fell over the room. "Why wasn't she terminated?" Gloria finally asked. "Because none of these complaints ever made it past middle management," Zoe explained, her voice tight with controlled anger. "Each was classified as a customer satisfaction issue rather than a discrimination complaint, which meant they never reached my office for review." One of the lawyers spoke up. "We've also discovered emails between Ms. Parker's direct supervisor and the VP of in-flight services discussing what they termed passenger profile management. Essentially supporting flight attendants who maintained the premium experience by discouraging passengers who didn't fit the first-class image." "Jesus Christ," Arthur muttered, the color draining from his face. "It gets worse," Zoe continued. "The system was designed to route discrimination complaints away from formal investigation. There's an actual flowchart in the training materials." Arthur collapsed into his chair, the magnitude of the situation finally sinking in. This wasn't just about one employee's actions or even the Washington family's influence. Their entire corporate culture was implicated. "Who else has seen this?" he asked quietly. "That's the other problem," the second lawyer interjected. "These documents were part of an internal audit conducted last year. The findings were presented to this board and subsequently buried." All eyes turned to Arthur, who had been chairman of that very meeting. "We recommended additional training," he defended weakly. "You recommended documentation that wouldn't hold up in court," the lawyer corrected. "And now we have a systemic discrimination case with the daughter of one of the wealthiest men in America as the plaintiff, represented by Brandon Mitchell, who has never lost a civil rights case." The room fell silent again as the executives contemplated their predicament. The company wasn't just facing a PR nightmare or even significant financial penalties. Their entire operational capacity was currently paralyzed, and the evidence suggested they had knowingly fostered discriminatory practices. Options? Arthur finally asked. Limited, Gloria replied bluntly. Washington Enterprises has us by the throat financially. Without their systems, we're grounded within 72 hours as fuel contracts expire. Our stock is already down 17% in after-hours trading. The legal exposure is incalculable, added the senior lawyer. Class action status is almost guaranteed once this evidence emerges, which it will during discovery. Zoe took a deep breath before delivering her assessment. From a cultural and public perception standpoint, we're facing extinction-level damage. Every minority passenger who's ever felt profiled or discriminated against on our airline is coming forward on social media. The recordings of Ms. Parker's comments make it impossible to claim this was a misunderstanding. Arthur stared at the ceiling, decades of corporate maneuvering and political calculation failing him in this moment of crisis. What would you recommend? He asked Zoe directly, perhaps the first time he had genuinely sought her professional opinion rather than her presence as diversity window dressing. Radical transparency and immediate action, she replied without hesitation. Fire everyone involved in burying these complaints. Issue a public apology that acknowledges systemic failures, not just one employee's actions. Commit to an independent audit of all our practices with results made public. And personally apologize to Dr. Washington with no conditions or non-disclosure requests. The shareholders will crucify me, Arthur murmured. They'll crucify you anyway once these documents become public, Zoe countered. At least this way, you control the narrative and demonstrate genuine remorse. As the executives debated their limited options, across the country in San Francisco, Jasmine Washington was reviewing her presentation in the luxury hotel suite her father had arranged. Though physically and emotionally drained from the day's events, her commitment to her patients and research remained unshaken. Brandon Mitchell sat across from her, monitoring the corporate fallout on his laptop while occasionally answering calls from Terrence, who was still in flight. They're panicking, Brandon observed, a hint of satisfaction in his voice. Internal documents are being leaked by the hour. Apparently, there's quite a history of similar incidents. Jasmine looked up from her slides. You don't seem surprised. I'm not, he admitted. When your father asked me to investigate discrimination in the airline industry last year, SkyWest had one of the highest rates of complaints. We just didn't have standing to do anything about it then. Last year? Jasmine set down her tablet. Dad was investigating this before today. Brandon hesitated, realizing he might have said too much. Terrence has always been proactive about identifying potential discrimination before you encounter it. After that incident with the hotel in Chicago. Jasmine remembered it well, being questioned repeatedly about her reservation at a luxury hotel despite having confirmation details. Her father had later acquired a significant stake in the hotel chain, forcing a complete overhaul of their check-in practices. So today wasn't just about me, she said slowly. He was waiting for the right moment to force industry-wide changes. Your experience catalyzed action on an issue he was already monitoring, Brandon clarified diplomatically. But make no mistake, his primary concern has always been your safety and dignity. Jasmine fell silent, processing this new perspective. Her father's protective instincts sometimes complicated her desire for independence, yet she couldn't deny the systemic barriers that even her credentials and accomplishments couldn't always overcome. Her phone chimed with an incoming video call from the conference organizers. Dr. Lawrence Chen, the committee chair, appeared on screen looking both concerned and slightly starstruck. Dr. Washington, we've been following the news. Are you still able to present tomorrow? Absolutely, Jasmine confirmed. My research is too important to postpone. Wonderful, Dr. Chen smiled. Actually, we'd like to offer you the keynote slot. Dr. Harrison has graciously agreed to switch, feeling your neural regeneration research deserves the wider audience. Brandon, listening nearby, raised an eyebrow. Dr. William Harrison was a legend in neurosurgery, 30 years Jasmine's senior. His voluntary step aside was unprecedented. After ending the call, Jasmine sat quietly for a moment before speaking. "This is exactly what I've always worried about," she finally said. "Am I getting the keynote because my research deserves it, or because I'm suddenly famous for being discriminated against? Or worse, because they fear my father?" Brandon considered his response carefully. "Your research earned your acceptance at this conference long before today's events. Perhaps this incident simply removed artificial barriers that might have delayed recognition you already deserved." Before Jasmine could respond, her phone lit up with a text from her colleague Dr. Maya Johnson. "OMG, have you seen what's happening at your conference? The neurologists are revolting." Attached was a link to a live stream where dozens of medical professionals, many wearing their conference badges, were gathered in the hotel lobby. Signs read, "Black Doctors Matter," and "Medicine Has No Color." Dr. Harrison himself stood at the front, addressing a reporter. "When I heard what happened to Dr. Washington, I was sickened but not surprised. Many of us have experienced similar treatment while traveling to share life-saving research. If changing our program order draws attention to these issues, it's the least I can do." Jasmine watched, tears welling in her eyes, as colleagues she'd never met shared stories of being questioned, detained, and disrespected while traveling to conferences. This spontaneous demonstration transcended her individual experience, revealing a collective pain previously expressed only in private conversations. Meanwhile, back in SkyWest's boardroom, the executives had reached a decision, not from moral clarity but desperate self-preservation. Arthur Reynolds drafted an emergency statement, committing to an independent investigation and immediate changes to training and complaint procedures. What he didn't include, what the public wouldn't learn until documents leaked days later, was his private message to senior staff: "Find a way to make this Washington girl go away quietly. Whatever it costs." That fundamental misunderstanding of both Jasmine and her father would prove to be Arthur's final mistake as CEO of SkyWest Airlines. By sunrise, the story had evolved far beyond a single incident on an airplane. Morning news programs featured split-screen coverage, on one side, medical professionals gathering to support Dr. Jasmine Washington before her keynote presentation, on the other, growing protests outside SkyWest headquarters and major airport terminals where the airline operated. But not all coverage painted Jasmine sympathetically. Conservative commentator Victor Brennan dedicated his morning segment to what he called the weaponization of wealth against American business. "Let's be honest about what's happening here," Brennan said, his expression grave. "A billionaire didn't like how his daughter was treated, rightfully or wrongfully, and decided to use his financial power to bring an entire airline to its knees. Is this really the precedent we want to set? That the rich can simply shut down companies that displease them?" The segment featured carefully selected clips from the original confrontation, edited to emphasize moments when Jasmine spoke firmly rather than Kimberly's more aggressive actions. The bleeding arm was notably absent from these curated clips. "And ask yourselves this," Brennan continued. "Would Washington Enterprises have frozen $1.3 billion in transactions if the passenger were not the owner's daughter? This isn't about racial justice, it's about billionaire privilege." Across town at SkyWest's headquarters, Arthur Reynolds watched the segment with a mixture of relief and calculation. Finally, someone was shifting the narrative. He immediately instructed his PR team to amplify these talking points, contacting friendly media outlets to emphasize the economic bullying angle. The airline's union representatives, sensing an opportunity to protect their member while redirecting blame, quickly adopted this framing. Harold Jenkins, head of the Flight Attendants Association, issued a statement calling for due process before financial execution. "While we do not condone discriminatory behavior from any of our members, we are deeply concerned by the unprecedented financial action taken against 30,000 innocent employees because of one alleged incident," the statement read. "Ms. Parker deserves a fair investigation, not trial by social media." The pushback strategy gained traction in certain circles, with hashtag #StandWithSkyWest starting to trend among conservative accounts and business forums worried about the precedent of a vendor wielding such power over clients. What SkyWest hadn't anticipated, however, was the counter-response from an unexpected source. James Harrington, a white business executive who had been seated in first class across from Jasmine, had remained silent during the incident. His face was visible in several recordings, looking uncomfortable but uninvolved as Kimberly Parker escalated her discriminatory behavior. That morning, he posted a 10-minute video that would shatter SkyWest's attempted narrative pivot. "I've been struggling with shame since yesterday," he began, his voice unsteady. "I sat there while a fellow passenger was harassed, assaulted, and subjected to racist abuse. I did nothing until it was too late. My silence made me complicit, and I've spent all night reflecting on why I froze instead of immediately standing up for what was right." Harrington, CEO of a mid-sized manufacturing company, continued with brutal honesty, "I kept telling myself it wasn't my business, that speaking up might make things worse. But the truth is, I was protecting my own comfort at the expense of Dr. Washington's dignity and safety. This is exactly how discrimination persists. Not just through the actions of people like that flight attendant, but through the inaction of people like me." He then methodically deconstructed SkyWest's emerging narrative, providing unedited footage from his own perspective and time-stamped observations that contradicted the airline's suggestions that Jasmine had been in any way provocative. "I travel first class every week," he noted. "I have never once been asked to repeatedly verify my boarding pass or prove my identity." Dr. Washington was singled out for one reason only, and we all know what that reason was. The video concluded with Harrington addressing fellow white business leaders directly, "If you're sitting silently while injustice happens right in front of you, you're not staying neutral, you're actively enabling harm. I failed that test yesterday. I'm committed to never failing it again." Within hours, the video had millions of views and prompted a wave of similar confessionals from other witnesses who regretted their initial hesitation to intervene. The hashtag silences complicity began outpacing SkyWest's defensive campaign. In San Francisco, Jasmine Washington prepared for her keynote address, unaware of the social media battle being waged over her experience. She had deliberately disconnected from news coverage to focus on her presentation, which had taken on significance far beyond the medical breakthrough it represented. As she reviewed her slides one final time, a knock came at her hotel suite door. Brandon Mitchell answered to find Dr. William Harrison, the distinguished neurosurgeon who had given up the keynote slot. "Dr. Washington is preparing for her presentation," Brandon began, protective as always. "I'll only take a moment, Dr. Harrison promised. At 72, his stooped shoulders and white hair contrasted with eyes still sharp with intelligence and purpose. Jasmine emerged from the suite's office area, recognizing the legendary surgeon immediately. "Dr. Harrison, it's an honor to meet you." "The honor is mine," he replied, waving away formalities. "I've been following your work on neural regeneration pathways for years. Brilliant innovation. Thank you for your generosity with the keynote slot," Jasmine said. "Though I hope the circumstances don't overshadow the science." Harrison's expression grew serious. "That's actually why I'm here. When I was your age, I was often the only black face at these conferences. I once drove 2 days to a medical symposium because no airline would book me on flights with white physicians." Jasmine listened intently as Harrison continued. "Things have changed, but not enough. What happened to you happens to brilliant medical minds every day. Doctors who don't have famous names to shield them. Your presence at that podium today isn't just about neural regeneration, it's about ensuring the next generation of black physicians doesn't face the same barriers." He handed her a small velvet box. Inside was a vintage lapel pin with the caduceus medical symbol. "My father's," Harrison explained. "He was a country doctor when many wouldn't seek treatment from a black physician. He wore this every day as a reminder of his right to practice medicine, regardless of who questioned his presence. I'd be honored if you'd wear it today." The gesture brought tears to Jasmine's eyes. This wasn't about her father's influence or public attention, this was about a legacy of struggle and persistence within medicine itself. "I would be honored," she said softly, pinning it to her conference blazer. "As Dr. Harrison left, Jasmine's phone chimed with a message from her father, who had finally landed in San Francisco. "Proud of you, Jazzy. Today you speak not just with your voice, but with mine and those of countless others who weren't heard. Show them why you belong at that podium." 20 minutes later, Jasmine Washington walked onto the stage at the International Conference on Neurological Advancement. The usual polite applause was replaced by a standing ovation before she'd spoken a single word. Cameras flashed as journalists captured the moment, a young black woman claiming her rightful place in medicine despite society's persistent attempts to question her belonging. She adjusted the microphone, touched her grandfather's pin for strength, and began not with the neural regeneration protocol that had earned her the spotlight, but with a more fundamental truth. "Medicine teaches us that healing cannot begin until we accurately diagnose the condition," she stated, her voice steady and clear. "America has a chronic condition of racism that continually prevents us from achieving our full potential as a society. Today, I'm here to talk about neural pathways, both those I've been researching to help trauma patients, and those we must collectively forge to create a more just world." The applause that followed suggested that in a small corner of the medical world, at least, that message had found fertile ground. Meanwhile, back at SkyWest headquarters, the attempted narrative shift was collapsing under the weight of emerging evidence. Internal documents continued to leak, revealing a disturbing pattern of discrimination complaints buried by management. The airline's stock had fallen 23% since trading opened, and flight bookings had plummeted as travelers sought alternative carriers. Arthur Reynolds received the news he had been dreading: the board had called an emergency session without him. His position as CEO was now measured in hours, not years. And still, Washington Enterprises' systems remained frozen, with no indication of when, or if, the financial lifeblood of the airline would begin flowing again. The boardroom of SkyWest Airlines had transformed from a bastion of corporate power to something resembling a war room. Emergency lighting cast harsh shadows across exhausted executives as they reviewed catastrophic financial projections. Outside, satellite trucks from major news networks had set up a perimeter, broadcasting live updates on what financial analysts were now calling the Washington effect. SkyWest stock has fallen 37% since trading opened, reported a CNBC anchor, the airline's headquarters looming behind her. Industry experts estimate the company is losing approximately $5 million for each hour its payment systems remain frozen. If Washington Enterprises doesn't restore access soon, we may be witnessing the fastest corporate collapse in aviation history. Inside, Arthur Reynolds faced the board members who had once deferred to his every decision. Now they regarded him with the cold calculation of survivors assessing which limbs might need amputation to save the body. "The Washington legal team has finally sent their terms," announced Eliza Chambers, head of SkyWest's legal department. Her voice betrayed the strain of 36 sleepless hours. "Let me guess," Arthur said bitterly. "They want my head on a platter." "Surprisingly, no," Eliza replied, sliding tablets to each board member. "There's no demand for your resignation specifically. But the other requirements are extensive." The board members scrolled through the document, expressions darkening with each swipe. "This is outrageous," sputtered Frederick Winters, the longest-serving board member. "Independent oversight of hiring and promotion practices. Mandatory quarterly diversity training for all staff. $50 million in funding for a new industry-wide anti-discrimination initiative. Who does Washington think he is?" "A man with his hand on our financial throat," replied Gloria Patterson bluntly. "And these terms are actually more reasonable than I expected." As the board debated, Zoe Thompson sat silently at the far end of the table. After years of having her recommendations for similar measures ignored or minimized, watching the company now scramble to implement them under duress brought complicated emotions. Validation mingled with frustration at the preventable damage. Her phone vibrated with a news alert. Investigative journalist Aisha Montgomery had just published a bombshell report titled, "Pattern of Prejudice, SkyWest's Hidden History of Discrimination." The article featured interviews with 27 former and current employees detailing systematic mistreatment of minority staff and passengers. Most damning was the revelation that Kimberly Parker had been the subject of 9 formal complaints before the incident with Jasmine Washington. Each had been downgraded in severity by the same supervisor, Thomas Griffin, who had even commended Parker in a private email for maintaining first-class standards. More disturbing was a leaked recording from a management training session where Griffin could be heard instructing supervisors to use your judgment about which passengers might make others uncomfortable in premium cabins. The coded language was transparent to anyone listening. "We have another problem," Zoe announced, breaking her silence to show the article to the room. "Montgomery has the Griffin recording." The blood drained from Arthur's face. He had personally approved Griffin's promotion 3 years earlier, despite HR flags about concerning passenger interaction philosophies. Before anyone could respond, the boardroom door opened to admit a junior staff member looking panic-stricken. "Sir, there's a situation in the lobby," she said, addressing Arthur directly. "Kimberly Parker is giving a press conference." Security tried to stop her, but the reporters were already inside. All eyes turned to the wall-mounted screens where, indeed, Kimberly Parker stood before a forest of microphones in SkyWest's own lobby. She appeared tearful but determined, her attorney hovering nervously beside her. "I want to clear my name," she began, voice quavering. "SkyWest is trying to make me the scapegoat for policies they created and encouraged. For years, we've been trained to discourage certain passengers from abusing first-class privileges." The attorney tried to touch her arm in warning, but Kimberly shrugged him off. "We were told to watch for passengers who didn't match the first-class profile. We all knew what that meant, but nobody said the quiet part out loud until I did, and now they're throwing me under the bus to save themselves." Arthur Reynolds lunged for the phone, barking orders to security to remove her immediately, but the damage was already done. Kimberly's tearful testimony was streaming live across every major network. "Check your employee manuals," she continued, growing more confident. Section 12, Paragraph 3 refers to maintaining cabin composition standards. That's code for keeping first class predominantly white and affluent. We were evaluated on how well we managed the passenger experience, which meant keeping out people who didn't belong. The attorney finally succeeded in pulling her away from the microphones, but not before she delivered her final bombshell. "Ask Arthur Reynolds about the quarterly bonuses for crews with the highest passenger satisfaction scores on routes with premium cabin integrity. Ask what happened to flight attendants who didn't enforce the unwritten rules. I was just doing what I was trained to do." In the boardroom, stunned silence gave way to chaos as phones began ringing simultaneously. The company's stock had been temporarily suspended from trading following a 45% drop. Major corporate customers were publicly announcing they would cease using SkyWest for business travel. Social media had erupted with thousands of #FlyingWhileBlack stories from passengers sharing similar experiences across all airlines. "She's lying," Arthur insisted desperately. "There was never any official policy." "Stop," interrupted Harold Blackwood, one of 2 black board members who had often found himself isolated when raising concerns about company culture. "The specific policy language she referenced is accurate. I flagged it 3 years ago and was told it was standard industry terminology." As the board members argued, Zoe Thompson quietly slipped from the room. She had made her decision. With steady hands, she emailed a comprehensive file to Aisha Montgomery. Documentation she had been collecting for 18 months on discrimination within SkyWest. The evidence included recordings, emails, training materials, and a statistical analysis showing that black first-class passengers were 12 times more likely to be asked to verify their seating assignments than white passengers. It was career suicide, but Zoe had realized something fundamental: her presence as Chief Diversity Officer wasn't helping create change. It was providing cover for systemic discrimination. By appearing to address the problem, SkyWest had been able to avoid actually solving it. In San Francisco, Jasmine Washington concluded her keynote presentation to thunderous applause. Her innovative approach to neural regeneration in trauma patients had the potential to restore mobility to thousands of people previously considered permanently disabled. Medical breakthroughs of this magnitude typically dominated scientific news cycles for weeks. Yet as she stepped from the stage, the waiting journalists wanted to discuss anything but her research. The intersection of discrimination, corporate accountability, and economic power had overshadowed the science. It was exactly what she had feared. Dr. Washington. How do you respond to critics who say your father is abusing his financial power? Is it true you're filing a $100 million lawsuit against SkyWest? Did you know about your father's plan to freeze SkyWest's accounts before boarding? Brandon Mitchell stepped between Jasmine and the press, escorting her through the crowd with practiced efficiency. Dr. Washington has just delivered groundbreaking medical research that could help countless patients. She'll address other matters at an appropriate time. In the privacy of a backstage room, Jasmine found her father waiting. Terrence Washington, typically the embodiment of corporate confidence, looked uncharacteristically uncertain. Your presentation was brilliant, Jazzy, he said, embracing her. Those reporters out there should be asking about neural pathways, not airline politics. That was always the risk, she replied, setting down her presentation materials. Using financial pressure made this about power rather than principle. Now my research is a footnote to a corporate war. Terrence's expression tightened. Would you rather I had done nothing? Let them humiliate and assault you without consequences? Of course not, Jasmine sighed, the exhaustion of the past 2 days catching up with her. But there's a difference between consequences and control. When you froze their accounts, you changed the narrative from discrimination to corporate strong-arming. Before Terrence could respond, Brandon entered with his tablet displaying breaking news, Kimberly Parker's impromptu press conference and subsequent revelations about SkyWest's systemic discrimination. The board has called for Arthur Reynolds' resignation, Brandon reported. And the Department of Transportation has announced a formal investigation into discriminatory practices across all major airlines. Terrence nodded with grim satisfaction. This was never about one flight attendant, Jazzy. Parker was a symptom of a diseased system. Sometimes treating symptoms isn't enough, you need to force the body into crisis to stimulate real healing. Jasmine recognized the medical metaphor as her father's attempt to bridge their different perspectives. She understood his protective instinct, but still wrestled with the implications. The question remains, she said quietly, what happens to the next black passenger who doesn't have a billionaire father? Who fights for them? The question hung between them, unanswerable yet essential. Through different methods, Jasmine's scientific precision and Terrence's economic leverage, both Washingtons were attempting to heal broken systems. One aimed to repair damaged neural pathways, the other, damaged social ones. Meanwhile, across social media platforms, a new hashtag was gaining momentum. Started by Dr. William Harrison and other medical professionals, #BeyondTheTicket highlighted achievements of minority professionals who continue to face discrimination while traveling to share their expertise. Jasmine's story had catalyzed a movement that extended far beyond one incident on one airline. The systemic nature of the problem was finally being acknowledged at institutional levels. Not because of newfound moral clarity, but because the economic and reputational costs of maintaining discriminatory systems had finally exceeded the benefits. As Zoe Thompson's leaked documents reached more journalists, the full scope of SkyWest's discriminatory culture emerged, training materials with coded language, performance evaluations rewarding exclusionary practices, and statistical evidence showing patterns impossible to dismiss as isolated incidents. The truth that SkyWest had spent years and millions of dollars hiding was now inescapably public, forcing a reckoning not just within one company, but across an industry that had long treated discrimination as a public relations problem rather than a moral failing. 6 months after the incident that had briefly made her the reluctant face of discrimination in America, Dr. Jasmine Washington stood in the neurosurgery wing of Baltimore Children's Hospital. Her neural regeneration protocol had successfully completed its first human trials, with 7 young patients now regaining mobility that conventional medicine had deemed permanently lost. Dr. Washington. A nurse approached, clipboard in hand. There's an emergency consultation in Trauma 3. 8-year-old girl, spinal injury from a car accident. Jasmine moved quickly through the hospital corridors, mind already shifting to the clinical protocols she had pioneered. The past 6 months had brought her research the recognition it deserved, after the initial media storm around SkyWest finally subsided. Medicine, not discrimination, had reclaimed center stage in her professional life. Pushing through the trauma room doors, Jasmine froze momentarily at the sight before her. A young girl lay immobilized on the table, medical staff working efficiently around her. Standing tearfully in the corner was a face Jasmine had never expected to see again, Kimberly Parker. Their eyes met across the room, recognition immediate and jarring. Kimberly's face registered shock, then shame, then something more complex. Jasmine hesitated only briefly before her medical training took over. She approached the patient, focusing entirely on the injured child. "I'm Dr. Washington, neurosurgical consult," she introduced herself to the trauma team. "What are we looking at?" Leah Parker, 8 years old, ejected from vehicle during collision, reported the resident. Suspected damage to C4 and C5 vertebrae with potential cord involvement. Jasmine examined the scans, conscious of Kimberly watching her every move. The injury was severe but within the parameters where her experimental protocol had shown promise. "Her mother is over there," the resident added quietly. "She's alone with her daughter." Jasmine nodded, making her decision instantly. "Prep her for immediate surgery. I'll speak with the mother." Crossing to Kimberly, Jasmine maintained professional composure. "Ms. Parker, I'm Dr. Washington, neurosurgeon. Your daughter has a serious spinal injury that requires immediate intervention." Kimberly seemed unable to speak, tears streaming down her face. "I need to ask. Are you familiar with experimental neural regeneration treatments?" Jasmine continued. "No," Kimberly whispered, finding her voice. "They just said she might never walk again. I've developed a procedure that has shown significant success in cases similar to your daughter's," Jasmine explained, setting aside their history entirely. "It's still classified as experimental, but the early results are promising. I'd like to try it for Leah, if you consent." Kimberly stared at her, recognition finally giving way to desperate hope. "You would do that? After what I did to you?" "I'm a doctor," Jasmine replied simply. "Leah is my patient." 5 hours later, Jasmine emerged from surgery cautiously optimistic. The procedure had gone as well as could be expected, though only time would reveal the full extent of recovery. She found Kimberly in the waiting area, a solitary figure hunched in prayer. "Ms. Parker," Jasmine addressed her formally. "The surgery was successful. We won't know the full prognosis for several days, but I'm hopeful." Kimberly stood, emotionally overwhelmed. "I don't deserve your help." "Not after, this isn't about you or me," Jasmine interrupted gently. "It's about Leah." Across the country, in the newly renovated headquarters of Washington Enterprises, Terrence Washington reviewed quarterly reports with his executive team. The past 6 months had transformed not just SkyWest Airlines but the entire commercial aviation industry. The Washington standards are now being implemented by 14 airlines globally, reported his chief compliance officer. Pre-implementation data shows an 87% reduction in discrimination complaints at participating carriers. The Washington standards had emerged from the ashes of the SkyWest crisis. A comprehensive set of anti-discrimination policies, training requirements, and accountability measures that Terrence had initially imposed as conditions for unfreezing SkyWest's accounts. What began as leverage against one airline had evolved into an industry-wide transformation. "And SkyWest?" Terrence inquired, though he already knew the answer. Completely restructured under new leadership, the CCO confirmed. Zoe Thompson was appointed CEO last month. The first black woman to lead a major U.S. airline. Their stock has recovered to pre-crisis levels, and customer satisfaction scores are at historic highs. Terrence nodded with satisfaction. His financial power had forced the door open, but the subsequent changes had come from within the industry itself as airlines recognized both the moral and business cases for genuine inclusion. His phone buzzed with a text from Jasmine, "Just use the protocol on a special patient. Call when you can." They spoke later that evening, Jasmine sharing the remarkable coincidence of treating Kimberly Parker's daughter. Of all the hospitals in all the world, Terrence marveled. What are the odds? That's not actually the most interesting part, Jasmine replied. After Leah was stabilized, Kimberly told me her story. Since the SkyWest incident, she's been attending racial bias therapy and working with a civil rights organization. She's been speaking to airline industry groups about how discriminatory corporate culture shaped her behavior. Redemption through education, Terrence mused. Still doesn't excuse what she did to you. No, it doesn't, Jasmine agreed. But transformation has to start somewhere. The same system that encouraged her behavior has now been dismantled. That matters more than individual punishment. Terrence smiled, recognizing his daughter's wisdom exceeded his own in some ways. While he had leveraged economic power to force institutional change, Jasmine understood that healing, whether neural pathways or social systems, required both pressure and compassion. 3 weeks later, Jasmine stood in Leah Parker's hospital room, reviewing the latest tests. The young girl's progress had exceeded even her optimistic projections. Though recovery would take months of therapy, the initial neural regeneration was remarkable. She'll really walk again? Kimberly asked, hope mingling with disbelief. Based on these results, I believe so, Jasmine confirmed. Leah is responding exceptionally well to the treatment. Kimberly hesitated before speaking again. Dr. Washington, I've been trying to find the right moment to say this properly. My apology on the news was public, but I need you to hear it privately too. What I did to you was inexcusable. I've spent months understanding the biases I internalized and the systems that reinforced them. I appreciate that, Jasmine responded. But the more meaningful apology is the work you're doing to prevent others from experiencing what I did. Their conversation was interrupted by a hospital administrator appearing at the door. Dr. Washington. The Washington Foundation representatives are here for the ribbon cutting. Outside the hospital, a crowd had gathered for the official launch of the Washington Foundation for Equitable Healthcare and Transportation. A $100 million initiative born from the SkyWest incident. The foundation would address discrimination in both medicine and travel, ensuring that expertise and innovation weren't hindered by bias. As Jasmine approached the podium, she spotted familiar faces in the audience. Dr. William Harrison, now a foundation board member. Brandon Mitchell, who had helped structure the organization's legal framework. Zoe Thompson, representing SkyWest's new direction. And most surprisingly, Diane Frost, the retired judge who had first spoken up on the plane, now heading the foundation's advocacy division. 6 months ago, an act of discrimination briefly overshadowed medical research that could help thousands, Jasmine began. Today, we launch an initiative that ensures neither discrimination nor innovation will be ignored. The Washington Foundation will support both equitable access to transportation and groundbreaking medical treatments for underserved communities. She continued, what happened on that flight revealed something important. Systems don't change just because they should, they change when the cost of discrimination exceeds the comfort of the status quo. This foundation aims to raise that cost through education, advocacy, and direct support for those challenging unjust systems. After the ceremony, Jasmine and Terrence stood together watching the diverse crowd of medical professionals, transportation executives, and civil rights advocates networking in ways that would have seemed impossible months earlier. Not how I expected things to turn out when I boarded that flight, Jasmine reflected. Sometimes the most important journeys take unexpected detours, Terrence replied, putting an arm around his daughter's shoulders. In the hospital room upstairs, Leah Parker took her first tentative steps with a walker, her mother recording the milestone on her phone. The video would later be shared at a medical conference where Dr. Jasmine Washington's research would receive long overdue recognition. The same week, a young black woman named Maya Davis boarded a SkyWest first-class cabin on her way to a job interview. The flight attendant greeted her with a warm smile and simple words that would have seemed unremarkable if not for the history behind them. "Welcome aboard. Can I get you something to drink before takeoff?" The moment passed without comment or controversy, exactly as it should. No viral videos, no frozen accounts, no national headlines. Just a professional interaction untainted by prejudice. This unremarkable moment was perhaps the most significant marker of progress. The transformation of the extraordinary into the ordinary, of equality from aspiration to expectation. Thousands of feet above the ground, Maya sipped her pre-flight champagne, unaware of the struggle that had made her ordinary journey possible. She was simply a talented professional heading to an interview, her dignity intact, her path unobstructed by the biases that had once been as invisible to some as they were insurmountable to others. And though challenges remained and systems still needed reform, something fundamental had shifted. The flight continued without incident, a small but significant testament to the power of accountability, the necessity of disruption, and the possibility of genuine transformation. What do you think about how this story ended? Was justice truly served, or do you believe more should have happened to those responsible for the discriminatory practices? Comment below with your thoughts on how companies should be held accountable for systemic discrimination. If you found this story impactful, please like this video and subscribe to our channel for more real stories that expose injustice and celebrate transformation. Share this with someone who needs to understand that change is possible when we refuse to accept discrimination as normal. Thank you for watching, and remember that sometimes the most powerful response to injustice is not just exposing it, but creating new systems that make it impossible to continue. This story teaches us that racism persists not just through deliberate acts of discrimination, but through systems designed to normalize exclusion while maintaining plausible deniability. True change requires both accountability and transformation. When Jasmine faced discrimination, it highlighted how privilege often determines which injustices get addressed. Her father's economic power forced a reckoning that countless others couldn't achieve. Yet the most powerful moment wasn't the financial leverage, but what happened afterward: systemic reforms, cultural shifts, and individual growth. The lesson isn't that we need billionaires to fight racism, but that we need to raise the cost of discrimination for all institutions. By documenting injustice, supporting whistleblowers like Zoe, and creating new standards of accountability, we can transform discriminatory systems. Most importantly, this story reminds us that healing, whether neural pathways or social structures, requires both pressure for change and compassion for growth. Justice isn't just punishment for past wrongs but creating structures that prevent future harms.